Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so the annual owners meeting is underway, and that also means that the Browns media gets to talk to Andrew Berry. Pretty in-depth, 30-minute interview. If you want to check out the full thing, it is on the Cleveland Browns website. He really zoned in, I think, and gave some good answers on three subjects here: offensive line, quarterback, and in some of the draft pick Miles stuff. I think he gave some pretty, I don't want to say clear answers, because he was more clear than he usually is, but he wasn't like just straight up transparent, which is expected with any kind of front office personnel or head coach. But I thought that there were some insightful answers in those areas. I think in the offensive line, he talked a little bit about how he views filling the offensive line, the versatility, how strict he is to what a player played in college versus what their position could be in the NFL. And I think when he talked about the quarterbacks, he pretty much laid out what the pathway is going to be for the quarterback room. It's stuff that we've talked about all year here, right? The Browns probably going to pursue, or at least hope to pursue, another quarterback on their rookie contract to compete with Shador in camp. And then when it comes to everybody else, it's kind of a wait and see approach throughout the spring. And then he also addressed some of the Miles stuff. Now we're going to go through these comments in his press conference comments in detail. I will play them in this video. We're going to start with Andrew Berry's comments about the offensive line. So here's a little bit of a supercut on what he talked about with the offensive line.
So where are you playing Elton Jenkins?
Yeah, so it's TBD. He's honestly like, he can play center, he can play guard. That's something that we're going to sort out as we get Elias a little bit further through the acquisition season. This is a guy who's played, starting level snaps at left tackle, right tackle, left guard, center. He can really do it all. We would view him more as an interior player. That is what we think is more his natural home. Whether it's center or whether it's guard, we'll work through that as we put together the position for the spring.
As you talk about that versatility piece, how important is that going to be for how you guys approach potentially drafting, looking at alignment in the draft?
Yeah, it gives flexibility. That's probably the biggest thing. Like, we feel good if we had to line up and play today that we could, with that group of linemen. But it certainly doesn't pigeonhole you into anything as you get to draft weekend.
Well, who would be your center today?
Today, hard to say. Like, honestly, it really depends on the competition at really one of the other guard spots opposite Zion. Obviously, we have Elton. We re-signed Tevin. Zach and Luke, there are guys that are going to have greater opportunity now that those vets are gone. So it's really, we would just be looking for the best pairs. Is that fair?
Yeah, finish that thought. So Zach finished playing center. Is he earmarked? Compete at center?
You mean Luke? Do you mean Luke? Zach really finished playing guard for us. You mean Luke finished playing center for a Posick?
Well, Luke got hurt in the Cincy game, and Zach finished center.
Zach's more natural position is guard. He can do both, but
competitor for center.
I would say this. Well, he can do both. We think his more natural position is guard. Is that fair enough to say? Yeah.
It's like this draft class of tackles. There's a lot of right tackles, and the number of true left tackles. It seems to vary. Do you believe that, or I know you believe a tackle is a tackle in a lot of ways, but do you feel like there's the depth of true left tackles is shallower maybe than?
I don't, and I think the distinction between right and left tackles in today's game, like the job descriptions they're identical. It's not like 25 years ago where you had an open side rusher, a closed side rusher, you had right-handed formations. Think about how we use Miles, right? Like, I don't know that, if you're the left tackle, you're getting Miles Garrett matchup all the time. The right tackle got to be able to block him too. So I just think those lines have blurred pretty significantly, in modern day football. If you think about it, you have Tristan Wirfs, who went from the right side to the left side. You hear Detroit talking about moving Sewell from the right side to the left side. Tyron Smith was a career right tackle in college and high school, moved to the left side. And then the other way, you have plenty of left tackles. Jack Conklin was a left tackle in college and moved to the right side. So I just think those distinctions are a little bit outdated.
So you think that you could get?
So again, he brought up a lot of the versatility and not being pigeonholed. I think he means that in the sense of not being pigeonholed in terms of getting an offensive line. He mentioned he would be fine with the offensive line that he has right now, but also not being pigeonholed in terms of where guys are going to play on the line. He was very clear about the flexibility about several people on this offensive line. Another thing that he kind of gave a clear answer to is who's actually in the run to maybe get a job if the Browns don't draft as many offensive linemen as we think they're going to draft. Those guys are Tevin Jenkins, Zach Zinter, who I think organizationally they still kind of believe in, and then Luke Whippler. So those are the three. We did not hear anything about KT Leviston playing guard, so that dream's over. He was only referenced as a tackle in today's press conference. So I don't think he's going to be there. And I think what the Browns are at least trying to signal publicly, I don't know if this is smoke, I don't know if this is genuine, but I think what they're trying to signal publicly, especially when how he talks about tackles, offensive linemen, is that the Browns could go best player available at tackle more than seeing a distinction between left and right tackles, right? If you're looking at a distinction between left and right tackles, then maybe you don't see a difference. You do see a big difference between like a Monroe Freeling and a Francis Maunoa, because Maunoa, if he plays tackle, is certainly a right tackle. And if you have Monroe Freeling, he's certainly a left tackle. But if you don't see much of a difference, then you can look at it preference-wise, right? Monroe Freeling is more of the prototypical pass protector, certainly some room to grow as a run blocker. Not bad, though. I think kind of overplayed how much his run blocking needs to improve. He wasn't terrible at Georgia run blocking. But Maunoa is a A+ road grader run blocker already out the gate. So maybe that's a direction that the Browns could go. Maybe like a Blake Miller or a right tackle, like a Max Anchor is somebody that they go with at right tackle. They think they can flip them to left tackle, right? I think what they're trying to put out there, especially when it comes to their offensive line, the offensive line draft strategy, is we are willing to break the mold. Well, not break the mold, but we're willing to look at tackle as just tackle instead of left and right tackle. That's what they're trying to sell right now. Now, that could just be a genuine reflection of how they feel, and Andrew Berry's just being transparent with us. That could also be smoke, right? Like last year with Travis Hunter, where he talked glowingly about Travis Hunter, and it was smoke about what he was trying to actually do, which is pump up the volume on Travis Hunter, right? Here, he's kind of pumping the brakes to a lot of people about, if the Browns are going to go strictly left tackle at 6. And he's saying, hey, we could look at other tackle options, right? And that's a very Andrew Berry way of doing things. So I don't think it's 100% smoke. I do think there is a chance that the Browns could go with somebody who's slotted as a right tackle and then flip Titus to left tackle. But what we do know of the situation is this, right? These are the facts that we do know. Titus Howard said that he's playing right tackle. You know what I mean? He was pretty adamant about that. Andrew has not said that Titus is going to play anything other than right tackle. So you see where it could be smoke, where it's like, oh, they're trying to convince people that maybe they want other tackles. They're trying to drive the market up for some trade backs, and I think they're trying to also gauge what they could get in a trade back market. But that's something to pay attention to, how they answered that question. All right, let's talk about how Andrew answered the Miles stuff here. Let's put those on the screen. And this is also about the draft pick rule thing that he put up that he also just took down today.
Andrew, since this was such a hot topic over the last few days or so, can you address what was the impetus behind the Myles Garrett contract modifications? And then also, of course, the corollary to that is everybody thinks you're going to trade him. So if you could talk about those two issues.
Yeah. So I think you guys know, like standard practice, I don't comment on player contracts. I guess probably the easiest thing to say is if we wanted to trade Myles, we wouldn't have needed to make a contract adjustment. So it doesn't have anything to do with that.
Why did you do it?
So again, I don't comment on player contracts. So I understand the question and the interest, but it's just something that we've always felt not to comment on player contracts or contract management strategy.
So can you state unequivocally that you're not trading Myles Garrett?
I'd say this, Mary Kay. Myles is a career Brown. He is one of the faces of our organization. I think we've been very clear, both past and present, in terms of our feelings on that. So I understand all the questions. I'll be honest, I don't really want to waste a ton more breath on the topic. Yeah.
Sure. But you feel like you guys are in a good spot with Myles?
We do.
Yeah.
To expanding the scope on trading draft picks, do you see the reaction to it, and do you expect it to pass?
Yeah, so Daniel, in terms of the impetus, we've largely been believers in, I guess, easing restrictions in terms of how teams can use their resources. So this is like in a similar vein, and really just getting, I guess, giving more flexibility to teams in terms of volume and creativity of transactions. As we look at it, our league relative to the other major leagues, the basketball you can trade, pick 7 years out. Hockey, I don't think there's any limitation. Obviously, baseball is the most restricted, but you can't trade picks at all. To us, 3 years is really probably more of like an arbitrary, marker in terms of like how far out you can deploy your future assets. Honestly, like Daniel, I think like a lot of the perhaps resistance is this idea that, a desperate general manager, a desperate head coach could, leverage a team's, future irresponsibly. I think that's a little bit more rooted in fear than reality, though. And I think for two reasons. I think, number one, there is always ownership oversight for every franchise. But two, probably the bigger point, like if you look back over the last 10 years, I think there have been 27 trades that have included a pick 3 years out. And of those 27, only 3 have included a first rounder, and only another 4 have included even day 2 picks. So like, I don't think you're all of a sudden going to see this trend where people are trading picks, 4 or 5 years out. I think those are very rare circumstances. But what it does do is it gives you more creative alternatives for, I would say, maybe less signature or less aggressive moves, because of how you want to balance the discounting of present versus future assets.
Is there a rigid rule now? There seems to be confusion. Is it an NFL rule you can only trade in 3 years out? Is it more of an unders?
No, it's a rule.
Yeah, that's a rule.
So if you were the receiving GM of a trade, how do you devalue a pick 3 years in advance?
Yeah, so
Number one.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Tony. So traditionally, I'd say, let me back up. Every team probably has their own methodology. Probably the traditional discounting is like you discount it around. Now there will be varying opinions of if that's like an effective, valuation of future picks. But I think that's what actually creates some unique transactional opportunities, because teams will value present versus future picks much differently. And it just gives you more opportunities for creative solutions that benefit both sides.
All right, so what I found interesting about this Myles thing, right? This is the first time he was asked about a Myles Garrett trade, and he just straight up did not say no. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't think it means that he's being traded this year, but it is a different answer than what Andrew has given. He has said straight up, we're not trading Myles Garrett before. Right? Like that was what you were hearing last year. Now he's saying that we view Myles as a franchise player and that Myles is a Cleveland. Like a lot of different ways of giving the impression of saying no without like necessarily just saying no, which is interesting because they weren't this creative about saying no last year, and they did not trade Myles Garrett last year. They signed him to extension. So that's not a big deal. I don't want people panicking, selling off their Myles Garrett jersey, but that's not nothing, right? That is certainly a change there. Again, last year, straight up just told people no, not for sale, right? When you asked Andrew Berry about it, he said, no, we have no plans to trade Myles Garrett. You ask him this year, he's saying no in spirit, but he's not just saying no like he has in previous years, which makes me believe that they're more open this year to trading Miles than they might have been last year to trading Miles, right? Now, I don't think anything's imminent. I don't think it's even close. I think maybe this is a conversation for next season and the season after that. And maybe this is a conversation we have for the next few years. And maybe it's like a lot of situations where you talk about a trade, and then you never end up doing the trade. But clearly they were hanging up the phone with anybody who was calling about Miles last year. This year, they're not necessarily hanging up the phone. I don't think they're interested in trading him, but they're not listening. You know what I mean? I don't know how far that goes, though, or at least that's my opinion about the situation. Now, the whole draft pick rule change thing, I did a video about this over the weekend. I think people got caught up in the volume, trading 5 first-round picks, and didn't really think this out through. And I think that might be because the Browns maybe didn't present this the best, or maybe the Browns aren't the best messenger for the rule, which I think they kind of understood because everybody looked at this, saw it was the Browns, and thought the Browns were trying to get 5 first-round picks back for Myles Garrett. I do think this is a rule change that should happen eventually because being able to trade 5 years of draft picks does open up a lot more possibilities, right? I've talked about this before, but if you're going to trade Myles Garrett to a contender, it's probably in the best interest of you and that contender to get those assets later than earlier if you feel like you have the organizational stability to swing it. Because let's say you trade Myles Garrett to Buffalo and he's on Buffalo for the next 2 years, those aren't going to be good first-round draft picks, right? But maybe after Myles leaves Buffalo, maybe Josh Allen leaves or retires or his play falls off and Buffalo's in a dramatically different place, and now you're getting top 5 picks because of that trade. Like, think about how the Boston Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder were able to become what they became, right? Championship caliber teams. And it was because they took the bet on trading star players right now to get draft picks in the future after whatever core their star player creates is gone, hoping that creates a situation where that team is now significantly worse. In Boston's case, it was with the Brooklyn Nets. Oklahoma City's case, that was with, was it the Clippers that they ran? No, they got shied from the Clippers off Paul George. But I think it's like the Rockets that they benefited off of and got all those extra picks from. But you trade a contending player to a contending team, you let that team contend, and they can even keep their first round pick that's going to be super high because they are contending. But you wait to take the assets from them until they aren't contending anymore, and those assets are much, much more desirable and have a higher chance of being more transformative. Right now, with how it's structured with 3 years, you might get 1 year where you benefit from that, right? If it takes like 2 years for a core to fall apart, it might be the case that you get 3 years of shitty draft picks, right? But if you're able to trade 5 years into the future, then all of a sudden you can play with those kind of rules. Now, the NBA is a lot different. You can trade 7 years into the future, no back-to-backs, but you can't have pick swaps. So it's a little bit different. But I see no reason why that kind of structure shouldn't exist in the NFL, given that the NFL has the same kind of safety traps to make sure that somebody doesn't trade away their future. So I get it. I get why people shat on that rule proposal when they first heard it. But I think if you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of different teams. And I wonder if somebody else proposes it next year, does it get taken more seriously because there's not like being read as, the Browns are trying to get 5 first-round picks for a team for Myles Garrett. All right, let's get to the next part of the press conference, which was him talking about quarterbacks. Again, my kind of brief synopsis of this is basically what we've been saying has been going on with the quarterback room. It's probably going to be Shedeur and a quarterback to be named later in competition to be the starting quarterback this year. When it comes to Deshaun, I'm sure they'll give it the spring to see where he's at. And if he's at a place where he can compete in the spring, then he'll be added to this competition. But if he's not, which I anticipate, he'll probably be more in the conversation to be emergency third string quarterback or something else, right? Like if it depends on how his play looks at that point. But I don't think the Browns are planning or betting on Deshaun Watson to do anything right now. given that, he's coming back from what he is. But here's Andrew's comments on it.
As it pertains to the quarterback position, is it just safe to assume that the incumbents, the current room, will be competing for the starting position? Or when you look to add a potential fourth quarterback, would you prefer the draft? Would you prefer signing a vet free agency? Or how are you kind of looking at the quarterback room as it stands?
Yeah, I'd say, Daniel, that, you always want to be flexible because you don't know how circumstances change or what opportunities come your way. Our lean would be if we do add someone to the quarterback room, it would be someone who's a younger player most likely. But I can't state that definitively because I don't know what the next couple of weeks will hold. Anyone that we bring in at any spot on the roster, our thought is that they are competing to play. They have something that we like in their skill set, and our expectation would be for them to work hard at.
Andrew, with regards to the Shedeur versus Deshaun specifically, how much do you balance short-term with long-term, knowing that team control with Shedeur goes well beyond 26, whereas Deshaun, there is sort of another hurdle that it creates.
Yeah, I think we're probably just more focused on performance in best players. Certainly time horizon factors into that. But just at any veteran player, there's no rule against extending the player's contract if they perform and they do well. So I wouldn't necessarily box it into any, one approach. It really will be performance based.
Andrew, I understand.
You kind of were 50-50. I mean, it almost seemed like Deshaun and Shedeur, like you were totally fine with either one of them if it worked out that one of them were the start. Is it still where you stand right now? Does it sort of still seem like they each have an equal opportunity to win the starting job?
Yeah, I'd say as we sit here on, March 29th and nobody has touched the grass, nobody has really worked with our coaching staff. I wouldn't handicap it for anyone. I think everyone in that room deserves opportunity. And so we'll certainly know a lot more as we get to the spring. We'll know even more as we get to camp. But I think, honestly, we wouldn't be doing the right thing for the team. We wouldn't be doing the right thing for that position if we didn't go in with it eyes wide open.
What was the for this?
And when you talk about the quarterback situation, how realistic is it that you will add somebody? You said it would probably be a younger guy. How realistic is it that you would add somebody that would actually come in here and compete for the starting job? And then the corollary to that is just how realistic is it that you would draft Ty Simpson at some point?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the first question. I think it's wholly realistic, Mary Kay. In terms of them competing for the starting job, anyone we bring in, we want to compete. But a large part of that will be, for any young player, will depend on their acclimation to the NFL and their readiness to play. And that's really done on a case-by-case basis. In terms of Ty specifically, I think you can understand we wouldn't necessarily comment on specific prospects. We have spent time with Ty. I think that's obvious, and we'll continue to do so. But I think he has a bright NFL future.
Last year, you were very visible at the quarterback pro days. This year, you're not. Why?
I think just every year you see Tony. Both where you're picking, the particular class, the access that you have, particular individuals. But we also do have one a month out for the draft, so there still is a lot of work to do.
Yeah, the pro days are done.
Yep.
That's for Indiana's.
Yeah. So Tony, I think actually last year, most of our trips were actually privates as opposed to the pro days. So I wouldn't say that's the only touch point.
Yeah, but you went to the pro days and then you stayed over for the visits.
So that's actually not
true. That's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did. They were at Travis Hunter's and Shedeur's.
That was the only one.
Specifically about Shedeur, you have mentioned at the end of the season, Cod has mentioned that he still has a long way to go. How far does he have to go to get to the point where you guys would feel comfortable putting his hands right from the start?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit TBD, Mary Kay, because I think all of our guys coming in, they're going to learn a new offensive system. We're going to have a fair amount of turnover on that side of the ball to have new teammates to learn, which is why the spring will be really important for the guys that are at the offseason program for us to really, really get a sense of their progress year over year. But, he's been working really hard. I would expect him to take a step forward, and we'll deal with that kind of week by week and month by month.
You said you prefer a younger fourth quarterback. Does that mean draft pick only or a younger veteran?
I wouldn't say I would not. I wouldn't rule out any method of acquisition.
Some of the stories I saw about that quote with Deshaun Watson just completely took it out of context. They made it seem like Andrew was talking about re-signing Deshaun Watson, but he's just saying like, hey, we don't anticipate if Deshaun wins out and he plays well, right? Like we could theoretically re-sign him. Very unlikely that they do that given how the contract is structured. But I think he was just making a point about how the rookie contract doesn't give anybody a specific advantage. I sense a little bit of cap in there because he talks about bringing in another quarterback, and that quarterback he's heavily hinting would be on a rookie deal, right? So obviously there is some value to having a quarterback on the rookie deal. So I don't know if he's being 100% honest on that front. I think he clearly prefers a quarterback on a rookie contract. And given that the Browns did not go after any veteran free agent options, which I thought was going to be the case, especially like after there was no interest about like Geno Smith or something like that. Like that, the idea that they were going to pay like $8 to $9 million like a Marcus Mariota didn't seem like something they want to do. So they want to keep the room cheap, which means get a guy on a rookie contract. And you could do the math there, right? They're not at a ton of pro days right now, as he said. There's other ways to visit guys and all of that, but like they're not at the pro days. But they are talking about they feel like it's likely that they could bring in a quarterback. What do you think that is, right? That's probably a quarterback who's going to be on a rookie deal, who's on another team right now that they're going to trade for. That's going to be the main competitor for Shedeur Sanders in camp. But that's it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.